She dressed ugly for a blind date. Unaware. He was a billionaire. CEO who fell for her at first sight. Sarah stared at the handwritten letter on her kitchen table, her grandmother's familiar looping script filling the pale blue stationery. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate shadows across the words that made her stomach twist with anxiety. "My dearest Sarah," the letter read, "I know you'll probably say no, but please hear me out. There's this wonderful young man I'd love for you to meet. Just one dinner. That's all I'm asking." Running her fingers through her graying hair, Sarah let out a heavy sigh. At 48, she'd grown comfortable with her quiet life among the library stacks, surrounded by the safety of well-worn books rather than the uncertainty of relationships. Her grandmother, though well-meaning, never seemed to understand that some people were meant for simple, solitary lives. She glanced around her modest kitchen, with its mismatched chairs and collection of ceramic teapots lining the windowsill. The afternoon mail was scattered across the table, bills mixed with library newsletters. This was her world. Comfortable, predictable, safe. "Oh, Sarah," she muttered to herself, pushing back from the table. "What would it hurt to just get it over with?" Walking to her bedroom, she pulled open her closet door. Her hand immediately went to the back, where she kept the dress she'd bought years ago at a clearance sale. It was a shapeless brown thing, 2 sizes too large, with an unflattering hemline that hit awkwardly at mid-calf. Perfect for ensuring there wouldn't be a second date. She held it up against herself, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror. The dress made her look even more plain than usual. Exactly what she wanted. Her grandmother had mentioned the restaurant was some fancy new place downtown, which only added to her determination to look as out of place as possible. "This should do nicely," she said, laying the dress on her bed. The fabric was slightly wrinkled, but she decided against ironing it. The more disheveled, the better. As she got ready, Sarah tried to quiet the small voice in her head that whispered of disappointment, not in the upcoming date, but in herself. When had she become so afraid of letting anyone see the real her? The woman who could lose herself for hours discussing 19th century literature, who knew every regular at her library by name, who still cried at beautiful passages in books. She applied minimal makeup, just enough to avoid looking completely unkempt, and pulled her hair back into a simple bun. No earrings, no necklace, just her mother's old watch that hadn't kept proper time in years. The drive downtown took longer than expected, traffic clogging the streets as the evening rush hour began. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her palms growing sweaty as each mile brought her closer to what she was sure would be an awkward disaster. The restaurant's valet stand came into view, its elegant awning and uniformed attendants making her ancient Honda Civic look even more out of place. She drove past it, finding a spot in a public lot 2 blocks away. The walk would give her time to steel her nerves. As she approached the restaurant, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, a beautiful evening that seemed to mock her deliberately dowdy appearance. Through the large windows, she could see crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, elegant couples dressed in their finest. Sarah paused on the sidewalk, clutching her worn leather purse like a shield. The brown dress hung limply around her frame, exactly as unflattering as she'd hoped. A young couple walked past her into the restaurant, the woman's designer dress and perfectly styled hair making Sarah feel even more like a sparrow among peacocks. Taking a deep breath, she reached for the heavy brass door handle. "Just get through dinner," she whispered to herself. "1 hour, then you can go home and tell grandmother you tried." The door opened, releasing a wave of warm air scented with garlic and herbs. Classical music drifted out, along with the gentle clink of fine china and murmur of conversation. Sarah stepped inside, her sensible shoes silent against the plush carpet, feeling every bit as out of place as she'd intended to be. The maitre d' approached Sarah with practiced elegance, his posture impeccable. "Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, I'm meeting someone. The name should be Rivers." Her voice came out smaller than intended, betraying her nervousness. "Ah, yes, Mr. Rivers is already seated. Please, follow me." As they weaved between tables of well-dressed diners, Sarah felt increasingly conscious of her deliberately shabby appearance. The maitre d' led her to a quiet corner where a man stood up from his seat, and Sarah's carefully constructed plan to ensure a quick escape suddenly felt foolish. Daniel Rivers was tall, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that transformed his handsome face. He wore a simple but clearly expensive charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, yet there was nothing pretentious about his demeanor. Sarah estimated he couldn't be much older than 35. "Sarah?" He extended his hand, warm and welcoming. "I'm Daniel. It's wonderful to meet you." His voice was rich and sincere, catching her off guard. She had expected polite disappointment at her appearance, but instead found honest interest in his gaze. "Hello," she managed, taking his offered hand. "I hope you haven't been waiting long." "Not at all. Please, have a seat." Daniel pulled out her chair with natural grace, waiting until she was settled before returning to his own. Sarah smoothed her intentionally wrinkled dress, suddenly wishing she'd at least ironed it. "This is quite a lovely restaurant," she said, looking around at the elegant decor. "I hope you don't mind. I probably should have suggested somewhere more casual for a first meeting." Daniel's smile turned apologetic. "I just thought the quiet atmosphere might be nice for conversation." "It's fine," Sarah replied, surprised by his consideration. "Though I feel a bit underdressed." "You look comfortable," Daniel said simply, without a hint of judgment. "That's what matters. Besides, I spend too much time in places where everyone's trying to impress everyone else. It's refreshing to meet someone who clearly values substance over appearance." Sarah felt her cheeks warm at his perceptiveness. Had he somehow seen through her deliberate attempt to sabotage the evening? The waiter appeared with menus, and Daniel easily guided the wine selection, asking Sarah's preferences before choosing a modest bottle, rather than the expensive options the server suggested. "Your grandmother mentioned you're a librarian," Daniel said once they were alone again. "What drew you to that profession?" "Books have always been my sanctuary," Sarah answered honestly, surprised by his interest. "There's something magical about helping people find exactly the right story at the right moment in their lives." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his eyes lighting up. "Any favorite recommendations?" "That depends entirely on the reader," Sarah found herself explaining, her usual reservation melting away as she discussed her passion. "Every person connects with different stories in different ways. It's like matching puzzle pieces, finding the perfect book for someone's current situation or mood." "I love that perspective," Daniel said, his enthusiasm genuine. "Actually, I just finished reading The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Have you read it?" Sarah's eyes widened with delight. "The Cemetery of Forgotten Books. It's one of my favorites. What did you think about the parallel between Daniel and Julian's stories?" Their conversation flowed effortlessly after that, weaving between literature, philosophy, and life experiences. Daniel listened intently when she spoke, asking insightful questions that showed he was truly engaged. His own observations were thoughtful and often surprisingly vulnerable, revealing a depth that contrasted with his polished exterior. Time seemed to slip away as they talked. Sarah found herself gesturing animatedly as she described her latest library program for underprivileged children, and Daniel shared stories about his own childhood love of reading. His face lit up when he talked about the books that had shaped his worldview, and Sarah discovered herself leaning in, caught up in his enthusiasm. For the first time in years, Sarah felt truly seen, not as the plain, aging librarian she believed herself to be, but as someone whose passions and thoughts were worthy of genuine interest. A small spark of hope flickered in her chest, warming her from within, despite her best intentions to remain detached. Sarah found herself gesturing enthusiastically as she explained the intricacies of her favorite Jane Austen novel, her earlier self-consciousness forgotten in the warmth of their conversation. And that's what makes persuasion so powerful. It's about second chances and the courage to trust your heart despite what society expects. Daniel nodded thoughtfully, his fingers tracing the stem of his wine glass. I've always appreciated how Austen weaves social commentary through her romance. Though I have to admit, Pride and Prejudice was my introduction to her work. Let me guess. Required reading in school? Sarah teased, surprising herself with her boldness. He laughed, a rich, genuine sound that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. Actually, my mother's influence. She believed every well-rounded person should understand literature. I fought it at first, but by the third chapter, I was hooked. Their empty dinner plates sat forgotten at the edge of the table, the remnants of a meal Sarah had barely noticed eating, so engrossed was she in their conversation. The restaurant's soft lighting cast a warm glow, making the other diners fade into the background. You know, Daniel said, leaning forward slightly, I go to a lot of business dinners and social events. Everyone's always trying to impress everyone else, talking about their latest achievements or acquisitions. This is... He paused, searching for the right words. Refreshingly real. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. I'm hardly impressive company compared to your usual social circle, I'm sure. That's exactly what I mean, Daniel said earnestly. Do you know how rare it is to meet someone who can discuss 19th century literature with genuine passion? Or someone who'd rather debate the merits of different translation styles than drop names of exclusive restaurants? She chuckled, relaxing further into her chair. I suppose I'm not exactly the typical blind date your grandmother usually arranges. Thank goodness for that, he replied with a grin. The last woman she tried to set me up with spent the entire evening talking about her Instagram following and trying to get me to invest in her wellness brand. Sarah couldn't help but laugh at his expression of mock horror. Well, I can assure you the only thing I'm trying to promote is the joy of reading, though I do have some strong opinions about proper bookmark usage. Do tell, Daniel encouraged, his eyes twinkling with interest. Dog-earing pages should be a criminal offense, she declared, warming to her topic. And don't even get me started on people who crack the spines of hardcover books. Daniel clutched his chest in theatrical dismay. I confess, I might be guilty of the spine-cracking offense. In my defense, it was college, and the book was particularly stubborn. Their shared laughter drew a few curious glances from nearby tables, but Sarah found she didn't care. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so at ease with someone, especially a virtual stranger. You know what's funny? She said, surprising herself with her candor. I came here tonight expecting... She trailed off, suddenly embarrassed. Expecting the worst? Daniel supplied gently. I could tell by the dress. Sarah's hand flew to her collar, heat flooding her face. You noticed? I noticed you were trying very hard not to make an effort, he said kindly, which made me even more curious about the intelligent woman beneath the disguise. Instead of feeling exposed or embarrassed, Sarah found herself touched by his perception and honesty. She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. I haven't done this in so long. Dating, I mean, I forgot it could actually be... fun. That makes two of us, Daniel admitted, his expression softening. Usually these setups are exercises in polite endurance, but talking with you... He gestured to their empty plates and the hours that had slipped by unnoticed. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a conversation this much. Sarah smiled, realizing she felt the same way. The nervous, defensive woman who had walked into the restaurant seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by someone who felt valued for her thoughts and interests rather than judged for her appearance. The pleasant evening shattered like fine crystal when a familiar voice cut through the restaurant's gentle ambiance. "Sarah, is that really you?" Sarah's spine stiffened, her fingers tightening around her water glass. She knew that voice, had spent years trying to forget it. Mark stood there, as polished and imposing as ever in his tailored suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. His presence seemed to suck all the warmth from their corner of the restaurant. "Mark," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Business dinner," he said, gesturing vaguely toward another part of the restaurant, but his eyes never left her face. "I almost didn't recognize you in that." He paused, his lips curling slightly. "Interesting outfit." Daniel straightened in his chair, his relaxed demeanor shifting subtly. Though his expression remained pleasant, something in his eyes had changed, becoming more focused, more alert. "Won't you introduce me to your friend?" Mark asked, already pulling up a chair without waiting for an invitation. The legs scraped against the floor with an unpleasant screech. "I'm Daniel," Daniel offered smoothly, extending his hand. "Sarah and I are having a wonderful evening getting to know each other." Mark's handshake was quick, dismissive. "Mark Peterson. Sarah and I go way back, don't we, sweetheart?" He turned to her, his smile holding that familiar edge that had always made her feel small. "Remember that little Italian place in the village? We had so many special nights there." Sarah's chest tightened. Those special nights had usually ended with Mark criticizing her choice of wine, her table manners, her appearance, always with that same smile that suggested he was doing her a favor by pointing out her flaws. "That was a long time ago," she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. "Too long," Mark insisted, leaning closer. "You know, I've been thinking about you lately, wondering if we gave up too easily. We had something real, didn't we?" Daniel cleared his throat softly. "Sarah, would you like some more wine?" His question was gentle but clear. He was offering her an escape from Mark's attention. Before she could answer, Mark jumped in. "Oh, Sarah's not much of a wine drinker. Always preferred those sweet cocktails, though I tried to educate her palate." He laughed, the sound grating against Sarah's nerves. "Actually," Daniel said, his voice carrying a note of steel beneath its calm surface, "Sarah was just sharing some fascinating insights about different wine regions. Her knowledge is quite impressive." Mark's smile faltered for a moment. "Well, she must have learned a lot since our time together. Speaking of which, Sarah, we should catch up properly. How about dinner next week, for old time's sake?" Sarah felt trapped, her old instincts telling her to agree just to keep the peace. But something about Daniel's steady presence beside her gave her strength. "I don't think that would be appropriate, Mark." "Come on, don't be like that," Mark pressed, his charm slipping slightly. "We were good together. Sure, we had our rough patches, but who doesn't? I've changed, I've grown. Just give me a chance to show you." I believe Sarah was clear about her answer, Daniel interjected quietly but firmly. His hand moved closer to Sarah's on the table, not touching but offering silent support. "And we're in the middle of our evening." Mark's face darkened. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but Sarah and I have history. You can't just—" "History is exactly what it is," Daniel interrupted, his tone remaining measured but authoritative. "And Sarah has made her wishes known. I think it's time you respected them." There was something in Daniel's calm assertion that seemed to finally penetrate Mark's persistence. He stood up, straightening his jacket with a sharp tug. "Well, Sarah, when you're done playing games with Junior here, you know where to find me." He pulled out a business card and tossed it on the table. "Don't wait too long. We're not getting any younger. With that parting shot, he turned and strode away, leaving behind a heavy silence and the lingering scent of his expensive cologne. Sarah sat frozen, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. The wonderful evening they'd been having felt tainted now, and she couldn't quite process the whirlwind of emotions Mark's appearance had stirred up. She glanced at Daniel, trying to read his expression, wondering if he was judging her, if this glimpse into her messy past had changed his opinion of her. The click of Mark's shoes faded into the restaurant's ambient noise, but Sarah still felt the weight of his presence lingering in the air. Her fingers fidgeted with her napkin, creasing and uncreasing the fabric as she tried to gather her thoughts. The wonderful evening they'd been having now felt different, tainted by Mark's interruption. "I'm so sorry about that," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect—" She trailed off, unsure how to explain the complicated history that had just invaded their date. Daniel's expression softened as he watched her. "You have nothing to apologize for, Sarah. Some people just can't take no for an answer." She looked up at him, studying his face for any sign of judgment or disappointment. Instead, she found only warmth and concern in his eyes. "You didn't have to defend me like that. I mean, I appreciate it, but—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I'm not used to someone stepping in that way." "Did I overstep?" Daniel asked, genuine concern in his voice. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. It's just—" He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly vulnerable gesture. "The way he was speaking to you, trying to minimize you. I couldn't just sit there and watch." Sarah felt a flutter in her chest at his words. "No, you didn't overstep. It's just strange, in a good way, having someone stand up for me like that. Mark always had a way of making me feel small." "You're anything but small, Sarah," Daniel said firmly. "You're intelligent, passionate about your work, and from what I've seen tonight, incredibly strong." The sincerity in his voice made her cheeks warm. "You barely know me," she protested softly. "I know enough to see that you deserve better than being talked down to by someone who clearly doesn't appreciate who you are." Their waiter approached with dessert menus, providing a welcome moment for Sarah to collect her thoughts. After they politely declined, Daniel asked for the check. "I've monopolized enough of your evening," he said with a gentle smile. "Let me walk you to your car?" Outside, the night air was cool and crisp, helping to clear Sarah's head. They walked slowly through the parking lot, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. "I really did have a wonderful time tonight," Sarah said, surprising herself with how much she meant it, despite Mark's interruption. Well, you know." "So did I," Daniel replied. "In fact, I'd very much like to see you again." He stopped as they reached her car, turning to face her. "But completely on your terms. No pressure, no expectations." Sarah felt that flutter again. "You really want to? Even after—" She gestured vaguely, encompassing the evening's drama and her deliberately unflattering outfit. "Especially after," he said with a warm smile. "You're real, Sarah. Do you know how rare that is?" They stood there for a moment, the parking lot lights casting a soft glow around them. Sarah found herself wanting to reach out, to touch his arm, to do something to acknowledge the connection she felt. Instead, she fumbled with her keys. "I should probably—" She gestured toward her car. "Of course." Daniel stepped back, giving her space. "Think about what I said? About seeing each other again?" Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As she got into her car, her mind was already racing, replaying every moment of the evening. The disaster she'd expected had turned into something entirely different, something that made her heart beat faster and her hands tremble slightly on the steering wheel. She caught one last glimpse of Daniel in her rearview mirror as she pulled away, still standing there, watching her leave. His words echoed in her mind. "Completely on your terms." No one had ever offered her that before. Scene 1. Revelations. Sarah sat at her desk in the library's quiet corner, absently straightening already neat stacks of returned slips. The morning light filtered through tall windows, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying moments from last night's unexpected date. She could still see Daniel's gentle smile, hear the way his voice grew passionate when discussing his favorite books. But what kept drawing her thoughts back was how he'd handled Mark's intrusion, not with machismo or drama, but with quiet strength and consideration for her feelings. He made me feel safe, she whispered to herself, then glanced around self-consciously, though no one was near enough to hear. The morning had been unusually busy, with a steady stream of patrons keeping her from dwelling too deeply on her conflicted feelings. But now, during the mid-morning lull, her thoughts wandered freely. Her fingers traced the edge of her desk as she remembered how Daniel had leaned forward, his presence somehow both protective and respectful when Mark had tried to assert himself. No one had ever defended her like that before, with such understated confidence. The sound of excited whispers drew her attention to the circulation desk, where her co-workers Jenny and Mike huddled over a phone screen. "That's definitely him," Jenny was saying, her voice carrying despite her attempt to whisper. "Daniel Rivers, the CEO of Rivertech. Did you see the article about their new AI development? The company's worth billions." Sarah's hand froze mid-motion. Surely they couldn't be talking about... "Wait," Mike said. "Isn't he the one who's been in all those tech magazines lately? Youngest billionaire in Silicon Valley or something?" "Exactly. And get this. Tracy from Reference said she saw him at Maurizio's last night. Can you imagine?" Sarah's chest tightened. Maurizio's. Where she'd had her date. Where she'd shown up in her deliberately unflattering dress, trying to ensure no second date would be possible. "They say he's worth over $10 billion, Jenny continued. "But he's supposed to be really down to earth. Drives a regular car, lives in a normal house. Well, normal for a millionaire anyway." Sarah's mind raced back through their conversation. Had there been hints? He'd mentioned working in tech, being fortunate in his career, but nothing that screamed billionaire CEO. He'd seemed so normal, kind, interested in her thoughts about community outreach and literature. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands, typing Daniel Rivers CEO into the search bar. Immediately, dozens of articles appeared, accompanied by photos that made her heart skip. There he was, in a crisp suit at tech conferences, in casual wear at charity events, always with that same warm smile she'd seen last night. "Oh, God," she muttered, quickly closing the browser. Her old dress felt even more embarrassing in retrospect. She'd gone on a date with one of the wealthiest men in the country, wearing something she'd specifically chosen to look unappealing. The rest of her shift passed in a daze. She went through the motions, shelving books, helping patrons, updating the catalog. But her mind kept circling back to Daniel. Every interaction from last night took on new meaning. His easy manner about picking up the check, the subtle quality of his clothes that she'd barely noticed, the way the restaurant staff had seemed especially attentive. As she locked up the library that evening, the setting sun cast long shadows across the steps. Sarah began her walk home, her thoughts a tumultuous mess. The comfortable connection she'd felt with Daniel now seemed impossible. What could a billionaire CEO possibly see in a small-town librarian? She remembered how genuine he'd seemed, how his eyes had lit up when she talked about her work at the library. But now doubt crept in with every step. Their worlds were too different. He moved in circles she couldn't even imagine, while she spent her days among books and card catalogs. The weight of this revelation sat heavy in her chest as she walked the familiar streets toward home. Every step seemed to widen the gap between their worlds, making what had felt possible last night seem like nothing more than a dream. The corner cafe was bustling with its usual morning crowd when Sarah pushed open the door, the bell chiming overhead. Her grandmother sat at their regular table by the window, 2 steaming mugs already waiting. The familiar sight of her grandmother's warm smile helped ease some of the tension Sarah had been carrying since yesterday's revelation. "There's my beautiful girl!" her grandmother called out, standing to embrace her. Sarah hugged her back, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender that always reminded her of childhood summers. "Hi, Grandma. Thanks for meeting me on such short notice." They settled into their seats, and Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm mug, drawing comfort from its heat. Her grandmother had already ordered her usual, a vanilla latte with an extra shot of espresso. "So," her grandmother said, eyes twinkling, "tell me everything about the date, and don't leave out any details." Sarah took a sip of her coffee, buying time to organize her thoughts. "It was nice. Really nice, actually, until I found out who he really is." Her grandmother's forehead creased with concern. "What do you mean, who he really is?" "He's Daniel Rivers, Grandma, the CEO of Rivertech. He's worth billions." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper on the last word, though the cafe's ambient noise would have covered any normal conversation. "And?" Her grandmother raised an eyebrow, seeming thoroughly unimpressed by this revelation. "And?" Sarah echoed incredulously. "Grandma, I showed up in that awful brown dress, the one with the weird shoulder pads that makes me look like a football player. I did it on purpose because I thought it would be just another disappointing blind date." Her grandmother's laugh was warm and rich. "Oh, sweetheart, if he saw past that dress to the wonderful person you are, doesn't that tell you something about his character?" Sarah stirred her coffee absently. "But our worlds are so different. He probably goes to fancy galas and board meetings. I spend my days helping kids find picture books and organizing reading groups." "And what's wrong with that?" Her grandmother reached across the table to place her hand over Sarah's. "From what you've told me about the date itself, before you knew about his wealth, you enjoyed his company, didn't you?" "Yes," Sarah admitted. "He was kind and intelligent, and we talked for hours about books and community service. He actually listened when I talked about the library's needs, but—" "No buts," her grandmother interrupted gently. "Sarah, you've spent so many years building walls around your heart. Maybe it's time to let someone in, regardless of their bank account." "It's not just about the money," Sarah protested. "It's about fitting into his world. What would his friends think? His business associates? I'd be so out of place." Her grandmother's eyes softened. "Do you remember what your grandfather used to say? The only place you need to fit is in someone's heart. If Daniel is half the man you described from your date, he won't care about any of that." Sarah's phone buzzed in her purse, making her jump. She pulled it out, her heart racing when she saw Daniel's name on the screen. "Would you like to have dinner again? This time you choose the place. No pressure, just good conversation." "Daniel." Her grandmother watched her face carefully. "Is that him?" Sarah nodded, showing her the message. "Well?" her grandmother prompted. "What are you going to say?" Sarah stared at the screen, Daniel's words blurring slightly as she considered her options. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "The only place you need to fit is in someone's heart." Taking a deep breath, Sarah typed, "I'd like that. There's a small Italian place on Oak Street I think you might enjoy." Her finger hovered over the send button for a moment before she pressed it. Her heart was pounding, but underneath the anxiety was a flutter of excitement she couldn't quite suppress. "There's my brave girl," her grandmother said softly, squeezing her hand. Sarah managed a shaky smile, even as her stomach tied itself in knots. "I'm terrified, Grandma." "Of course you are, dear. That's how you know it matters." The morning sun streamed through the windows of the daily grind, casting warm patches of light across the wooden tables. Sarah arrived early, choosing a quiet corner booth away from the morning rush. Her fingers fidgeted with the corner of her navy cardigan as she waited, her thoughts racing despite her grandmother's reassuring words from yesterday. The bell above the door chimed, and Daniel walked in. Today he wore a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, a far cry from the suited billionaire CEO she'd imagined after learning his identity. His eyes found hers immediately, and his genuine smile made her heart skip. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting," Daniel said, sliding into the seat across from her. "No, I just got here," Sarah replied, grateful that her voice remained steady. "I probably should have warned you. This place isn't exactly five-star dining." Daniel glanced around at the mismatched furniture and local art decorating the walls. "It's perfect. Much better than those stuffy restaurants where everyone's more focused on taking pictures of their food than eating it." A young barista approached their table, and they ordered a simple Americano for Daniel and a chai latte for Sarah. The casual interaction helped ease some of Sarah's tension. "So," Daniel began, once they were alone again, "tell me about your favorite book, the one that made you fall in love with reading." Sarah's eyes lit up despite her nervousness. "That's a dangerous question to ask a librarian. I might never stop talking." "I've got time," he said, leaning back with an encouraging smile. "Well," Sarah took a breath, then launched into the story of how she discovered The Secret Garden at age 9. As she spoke about the magic of that first reading experience, her usual self-consciousness faded. Daniel listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely interested. Their drinks arrived, and the conversation flowed naturally from books to childhood memories. Daniel shared stories about growing up with parents who pushed him toward business, while he secretly dreamed of writing computer games. "That's actually how I started my company," he admitted, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "I wanted to create something that combined storytelling with technology." Sarah found herself leaning forward, caught up in his enthusiasm. "What was your first game about?" "It was terrible," he laughed. "A clumsy mix of fantasy and coding tutorials. But it taught me that following your passion, even if it seems ridiculous at first, can lead to amazing places." "Is that why you—" Sarah hesitated, then pushed forward. "Why you seemed so interested in the library's community programs." Daniel's expression grew serious. "I believe in the power of education and imagination. Money's just a tool. What matters is how you use it to make a difference." Their conversation shifted to their goals and dreams. Sarah shared her vision for expanding the library's reach into underserved communities, while Daniel spoke about his hope to make technology more accessible to everyone. As they talked, Sarah felt the wall she'd built around herself beginning to crack. There was something disarming about the way Daniel spoke about his success, not with pride or arrogance, but with a sense of responsibility and purpose. The morning crowd thinned out, and Sarah realized they'd been talking for over 2 hours. "I should probably get going," she said reluctantly. "I have the afternoon shift at the library." Daniel nodded, standing to help her with her coat. As they walked to the door, he turned to face her. "Sarah, I want you to know something. I understand this isn't easy. The whole situation is complicated. But I'd like to keep seeing you, at whatever pace makes you comfortable. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other." The sincerity in his voice made Sarah's throat tight. "I'd like that," she managed to say. "Thank you for understanding." "Thank you for giving me a chance," he replied softly. "And for recommending this place. It's much better than any overpriced restaurant I could have chosen." Sarah sat at her desk in the library's staff room, sorting through her morning emails. The usual notices about overdue books and upcoming events filled her inbox, until a message from the library board caught her eye. Her finger hesitated over the mouse, heart quickening at the subject line. Urgent. Major renovation project approved. Opening the email, her eyes widened as she read through the details. A substantial anonymous donation had been made specifically for renovating the children's section and expanding the community learning center, projects she'd been championing for years. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, scrolling through the lengthy proposal. The numbers made her head spin. New computers, interactive learning stations, a dedicated storytelling corner with comfortable seating, and even a small theater space for educational presentations. Mrs. Peterson, her elderly co-worker, peered over her shoulder. "What's got you looking like you've seen a ghost, dear?" "Someone donated enough money to fund all our proposed renovations," Sarah explained, her voice trembling with excitement. "Everything we've been dreaming about for the past 5 years, it's actually happening?" She printed the email, walking through the library's worn carpet and dated furnishings, imagining the transformation. The children's section, currently cramped and showing its age, would become a vibrant learning space. The thought of finally being able to serve the community properly brought tears to her eyes. Throughout the day, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious donor. The board mentioned only that it was a tech company interested in promoting education, but something about the timing nagged at her. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the excited faces of her regular patrons as she shared the news. That evening, she met Daniel at an intimate Italian restaurant downtown. He was already seated when she arrived, standing to greet her with a warm smile. Sarah noticed he seemed slightly nervous, his fingers drumming lightly on the table as she settled into her seat. "You look happy," he observed, his eyes studying her face. "Good day at work?" Sarah couldn't contain her excitement. "The most amazing thing happened. The library received this incredible anonymous donation. All these projects I've been hoping to implement, they're finally going to happen." Daniel's smile shifted slightly, becoming more reserved. He took a sip of water, then set the glass down carefully. "Actually, Sarah, there's something I need to tell you about that." The enthusiasm in Sarah's expression faltered as realization dawned. "It was you, wasn't it?" she asked quietly. Daniel nodded, leaning forward. "My company made the donation. I wanted to help, but I also didn't want it to affect this." He gestured between them. "I've seen how passionate you are about the library and its impact on the community." Sarah sat back, her mind racing. The initial joy of the donation now felt complicated, tainted somehow. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was going to," Daniel replied, running a hand through his hair. "But I wanted it to be about the library, not about me or us. I didn't want you to feel obligated or indebted," Sarah finished, her throat tight. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. "That's exactly what I was trying to avoid," Daniel said earnestly. "I respect you too much to want that kind of dynamic between us." Sarah stared at her untouched glass of water, processing the revelation. Part of her was deeply touched by his generosity and understanding of what mattered to her. Another part felt betrayed by the secrecy, wondering what else he might be hiding. "I don't know how to feel about this," she admitted, finally meeting his gaze. "It's incredibly generous, and the library desperately needed it, but—" She trailed off, struggling to articulate the complexity of her emotions. Daniel reached across the table, then seemed to think better of it and pulled his hand back. "I understand if you're upset. I should have been upfront with you from the beginning. I wanted to help without making things awkward between us." Sarah sat there, her dinner forgotten, caught between gratitude and confusion. The man across from her had just made her professional dreams come true. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. Trust, she realized, was more complicated than she'd thought. Sarah stared at her half-eaten plate of pasta, her appetite completely gone. The restaurant's warm lighting and soft music felt suffocating now, a stark contrast to the cold realization settling in her chest. She took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts before speaking. "I feel like I don't even know who you really are," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. "First, I find out you're a billionaire CEO, and now this? What else haven't you told me, Daniel?" Daniel winced at her words, setting down his fork. "Sarah, please. I'm still the same person you've been getting to know." "Are you?" She met his eyes, her own glistening with unshed tears. "Because the person I thought I knew wouldn't hide something this significant. Do you have any idea how this makes me feel? Like I'm some sort of charity case you picked up at random?" "That's not—" Daniel started, but Sarah held up her hand. "Let me finish," she insisted. "I've spent my entire career working hard for everything I've achieved. Every grant proposal, every community project, it's all been through legitimate channels. And now you just swoop in with your millions, making decisions about my workplace without even telling me?" The hurt in Daniel's eyes was evident, but Sarah couldn't stop. The words tumbled out, fueled by her insecurities and fears. "Is this how you operate? Find someone less fortunate and then try to fix their life? Because I don't need fixing, Daniel. I don't need saving." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Daniel leaned forward, his shoulders tense. "Sarah, that's not what this was about at all. I saw how passionate you were about the library, about making a difference in people's lives. When you talked about those renovation plans during our first date, your whole face lit up. I wanted to help because I believed in your vision, not because I pitied you." "But why the secrecy?" Sarah pressed, wrapping her arms around herself. "Why not just tell me?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his frustration. "Because every time I tell someone who I am, everything changes. Suddenly, I'm not Daniel anymore. I'm Daniel Rivers, the billionaire. People either want something from me or they're intimidated by me. He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I just wanted you to see me as a person first. Someone who could relate to your love of books and your desire to help others." Sarah felt her anger wavering, but the hurt remained. "But don't you see? By hiding this, you've made it even worse. Now I'm questioning everything. Was any of this real, or was I just an interesting experiment for you?" "God, no," Daniel replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Sarah, meeting you has been the most genuine thing that's happened to me in years. You didn't care about impressing me. You showed up in that dress—" He stopped abruptly, realizing too late what he was about to say. "This old thing?" Sarah gestured to her dress, letting out a bitter laugh. "The one I wore specifically because I didn't want to give anyone the wrong idea? Well, I guess that backfired spectacularly." "That's exactly what I mean," Daniel said earnestly. "You were real. No pretense, no agenda. Do you know how rare that is in my world? I admired that about you from the start. I still do." Sarah felt tears threatening to fall, and blinked them back. "I don't know what to think anymore, Daniel. You say you wanted me to see the real you, but you've been hiding such a huge part of yourself. How can I trust that anything else you've told me is true?" Daniel's face fell, the pain evident in his expression. "I understand that I hurt you. That wasn't my intention. I didn't want my wealth to be the thing that defined me in your eyes. I wanted you to see me for who I am, not what I have." Sarah stood up slowly, gathering her purse. "I need time to process this. Everything feels complicated now." She could see the hurt in Daniel's eyes, and part of her wanted to stay, to work through this, but the larger part needed space to think. Daniel nodded, respecting her decision even as his disappointment showed clearly on his face. I understand. Just please know that nothing about how I feel about you is fake or calculated. Everything I've shared with you has been real. Sarah sat at her desk in the library, staring blankly at the computer screen. The familiar smell of old books and polished wood usually brought her comfort, but today it did little to ease the turmoil in her mind. She'd been trying to focus on cataloging new arrivals for the past hour, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Daniel. A stack of donation forms caught her eye, the renovation project paperwork. She pushed them aside, not ready to deal with the reminder of Daniel's involvement. The sound of children laughing in the reading corner provided a welcome distraction. Miss Donovan? Jenny, one of her younger colleagues, approached her desk. The contractor's here about the renovation plans. Should I tell him you're busy? Sarah straightened her shoulders. No, I'll handle it. Work was work, regardless of where the funding came from. She couldn't let her personal feelings interfere with her professional responsibilities. Throughout the meeting, Sarah maintained her composure, discussing layout changes and timeline projections, but each mention of the anonymous donor made her stomach twist. She couldn't help but picture Daniel's face when she'd walked away from him at the restaurant. During her lunch break, Sarah retreated to her favorite corner of the library, a quiet spot near the biography section. She unwrapped her sandwich mechanically, hardly tasting it as she ate. Her phone sat silent beside her. She hadn't heard from Daniel in 3 days, not since their confrontation. He was respecting her request for space, which somehow made her feel both relieved and disappointed. You're hiding again, a familiar voice said. Sarah looked up to find her grandmother standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee from the cafe across the street. I'm not hiding, Sarah protested weakly. I'm working. Her grandmother settled into the chair across from her, sliding one of the coffee cups forward. Sweetheart, I've known you since the day you were born. This is definitely hiding. Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm cup, grateful for the comfort it provided. I just needed some time to think. And what conclusions have you come to? Her grandmother's eyes were kind, but knowing. That everything's complicated? Sarah sighed. That I don't know how to handle someone like Daniel in my life? That maybe I'm not cut out for this kind of relationship? Her grandmother took a thoughtful sip of coffee. You know, when your grandfather first asked me out, I almost said no. He came from money, had a fancy education, everything I didn't have. Sarah looked up, surprised. She'd never heard this story before. But you married him, she said. I did. Because I realized that all those surface differences didn't matter compared to how he made me feel. He saw me, Sarah. The real me. Her grandmother reached across the table to pat her hand. The way Daniel sees you. But he lied to me about the donation, Sarah protested. Did he? Or did he just wait to tell you until he thought you might understand his reasons? Her grandmother's voice was gentle. Sometimes people make mistakes trying to protect the things they care about. Sarah slumped in her chair. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. What if I'm not enough? What if I can't fit into his world? Oh, sweetheart. Her grandmother's voice was full of understanding. Love isn't about fitting into someone else's world. It's about creating a new one together. Sarah traced the rim of her coffee cup, considering her grandmother's words. But what if it doesn't work out? What if it does? Her grandmother countered. Sarah, I've watched you build walls around your heart for years. You're so afraid of getting hurt that you're missing out on the chance to be happy. Don't let fear make your decisions for you. Sarah felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. I don't know what to do. Yes, you do, her grandmother said softly. You're just scared to do it. And that's okay. Being scared means it matters. but don't let that fear stop you from giving love a chance. Sarah sat there, her coffee growing cold, as her grandmother's words sank in. She thought about Daniel's smile, the way he listened when she talked about books, how he'd defended her against Mark without making a scene. The memory of their conversations, the genuine connection they'd shared, tugged at her heart. But the doubt still lingered, whispering its familiar warnings. She was standing at a crossroads, caught between the safety of her carefully constructed walls and the terrifying possibility of letting someone in. Sarah stared at her phone, the blank message screen taunting her. She'd typed and deleted a dozen different messages over the past hour, none of them feeling quite right. The library was quiet around her, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the windows. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard again. Finally, taking a deep breath, she typed, "I'm sorry for how I reacted. Could we talk?" She pressed send before she could change her mind, then set the phone face down on her desk. Her heart hammered in her chest as she tried to focus on cataloging the new arrivals. Every time her phone buzzed with a notification, she jumped. When it finally vibrated with Daniel's response, she had to take several steadying breaths before picking it up. "I'd like that. Coffee at Morton's in an hour?" Sarah looked at the clock. It was nearly the end of her shift anyway. "See you there," she replied, her hands trembling slightly. The walk to Morton's coffee shop felt both too long and too short. Sarah's mind raced with all the things she wanted to say, all the feelings she needed to explain. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and she spotted Daniel immediately, sitting at a corner table with 2 steaming cups already waiting. He stood as she approached, his expression careful but hopeful. "I got you Earl Grey," he said softly. "I remembered it's your favorite." The simple gesture, that he'd remembered such a small detail about her, made Sarah's throat tight. She sat down, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Thank you," she managed, "for the tea and for meeting me." Daniel settled back into his chair, his fingers idly tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "I'm glad you reached out," he said. "I've been wanting to call, but I thought you needed space." Sarah nodded, gathering her courage. "I did, and I needed time to think." She took a sip of tea, letting its familiar warmth steady her. "I'm sorry I reacted so strongly about the library donation. It wasn't fair to you." "I understand why you did," Daniel said quietly. "I should have been upfront about it from the beginning." "It wasn't just about the donation," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was everything. Your world is so different from mine. I keep thinking about how I showed up to our first date in that awful dress. How simple my life must seem to someone like you." Daniel leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Sarah, that's exactly what drew me to you. Do you know how refreshing it was to meet someone who didn't care about impressing me? Who was genuine and real?" "But I'm just a librarian," she said, voicing the fear that had been eating at her. "I live in a tiny apartment. I wear second-hand clothes. You're passionate about books and learning," Daniel interrupted gently. "You care about making knowledge accessible to everyone. You light up when you talk about helping kids discover reading. That's who you are, Sarah, and that's what matters to me." Sarah felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of being judged, of not fitting in, of disappointing you." Daniel reached across the table, hesitating for a moment before taking her hand. "I don't want you to fit in. I don't want you to change. I want you. The real you, who gets excited about new book arrivals and wears comfortable shoes because she's on her feet all day helping people." His thumb traced small circles on her palm as he continued. "My world, it's full of people pretending to be something they're not. Meeting you was like finally being able to breathe." Sarah looked at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch spread through her. "I've spent so long protecting myself," she said softly. "Building walls to keep from getting hurt. But with you, I want to try being brave." "That's all I'm asking for," Daniel said, squeezing her hand gently. "Just a chance to show you that who you are is exactly who I want to know." Sarah stood in front of the small neighborhood bookstore, watching Daniel examine the window display with genuine interest. It had been her suggestion to show him her favorite local haunts, and to her surprise, he'd eagerly agreed. "This place looks amazing," Daniel said, his eyes lighting up at the stack of vintage first editions prominently displayed. "How have I never been here before?" Sarah smiled, feeling more relaxed than she had in weeks. "It's one of those hidden gems. Come on, wait until you see the inside." The bell chimed softly as they entered, and the familiar scent of old books and coffee wrapped around them. Mrs. Chen, the elderly owner, looked up from her crossword puzzle and waved. "Sarah, dear, and who's this handsome young man?" "This is Daniel," Sarah said, feeling her cheeks warm slightly. "He's a fellow book lover." Mrs. Chen's eyes twinkled. "Well, any friend of Sarah's is welcome here. Take your time browsing." Daniel followed Sarah through the narrow aisles, ducking under low-hanging strings of fairy lights. His fingers trailed along the spines of books, pausing occasionally to pull one out and examine it. "This is incredible," he murmured. "Look at this first edition Steinbeck." Sarah watched him carefully handle the book, noting how his eyes lit up just like any other bibliophile's would. It struck her then. He wasn't putting on an act. This was genuinely Daniel, sharing her excitement over literary treasures. They spent the next hour exploring the shop's hidden corners, Sarah showing him her favorite reading nook tucked behind the history section, and Daniel discovering a rare photography book he'd been searching for. "I can't believe you found that," Sarah said as they left the shop, Daniel clutching his purchase. "I've only ever seen it in library special collections." "This is why I love places like this," he replied, grinning. "You never know what you'll find." They walked to the small park nearby, settling on a bench with coffee from the local cafe. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, creating patches of warmth on their faces. "Tell me about your first library card," Daniel said, turning to face her. "I bet you remember getting it." Sarah laughed, surprised by the memory that surfaced. "I was 6. I practiced writing my name for weeks just so I could sign it myself. The librarian had to help me reach the counter to fill out the form." "Did you max it out immediately?" "Of course. My mom had to help me carry all the books home." She took a sip of coffee, smiling. "What about you? What was little Daniel like?" He leaned back, his expression nostalgic. "Honestly, a bit of a nerd. I used to take apart computers just to see how they worked. Drove my parents crazy." "Did you put them back together?" "Eventually," he chuckled, after a few expensive mistakes. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from childhood memories to favorite authors to embarrassing school stories. Sarah found herself laughing more than she had in years, especially when Daniel described his failed attempt at joining his high school baseball team. "You did not break the coach's car window." "I wish I was making it up," he groaned. "My dad had to pay for the repairs. I stuck to coding after that." As the afternoon wore on, Sarah realized something had shifted. The nagging voice in her head that usually reminded her of their differences had grown quiet. Instead, she saw Daniel for who he was, a man who got excited about rare books, who could laugh at himself, who listened to her stories with genuine interest. They walked through the park, stopping to watch a group of kids flying kites. Daniel bought them both ice cream from a vendor, and they sat on the grass, trading bites of different flavors. "You've got a bit of—" Daniel gestured to her chin, and Sarah wiped at it with a napkin, giggling. "Better?" "Perfect," he said softly, and she knew he wasn't just talking about the ice cream. For the first time since learning about his wealth, Sarah felt completely at ease. Here, sharing ice cream and trading stories, they were just Sarah and Daniel, two people getting to know each other. No pretenses, no judgments. The community fair buzzed with life as Sarah and Daniel made their way through the crowded street. Local vendors lined both sides, selling everything from handmade crafts to fresh produce. The scent of kettle corn and grilled corn on the cob wafted through the air. "I can't believe you've never been to our fall festival before," Sarah said, watching Daniel's eyes light up at each new discovery. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, seeing him so genuinely excited about her small town's annual event. "This is amazing," Daniel replied, pausing to watch a street performer juggle flaming pins. "It's so real. Not like those corporate events I usually get dragged to." Sarah squeezed his hand, understanding exactly what he meant. Here, among the cheerful chaos of children running with painted faces and elderly couples sharing cotton candy, they were just another pair enjoying the festivities. Mrs. Peterson, one of Sarah's regular library patrons, waved from her quilting booth. "Sarah, dear, come see what I've been working on." Sarah led Daniel over, proud to introduce him to the grandmother-like figure who had been recommending books to her for years. To her delight, Daniel immediately engaged in conversation about the intricate pattern of Mrs. Peterson's latest quilt. "My grandmother used to quilt," he shared, running his fingers gently over the stitching. "She taught me to appreciate the patience it takes, though I never learned myself." Mrs. Peterson beamed. "Well, it's not too late to learn, young man. Sarah, you've found yourself a keeper here." Instead of feeling embarrassed or defensive about the comment, Sarah found herself smiling. "I think so too," she said softly, catching Daniel's eye. They continued through the fair, stopping to try local honey and admire handcrafted jewelry. At the book exchange booth, run by the library volunteers, Sarah's co-workers greeted them warmly, treating Daniel like any other visitor rather than a billionaire CEO. "Oh, look!" Daniel suddenly exclaimed, pointing to a ring toss game. "I used to be terrible at these as a kid. Want to see if I've improved?" Sarah laughed as Daniel paid for 3 rings, his face scrunched in concentration. His first 2 throws missed completely, but the third landed perfectly around a bottleneck. The booth operator handed him a small stuffed penguin. "For you," Daniel said, presenting it to Sarah with an exaggerated bow, "to commemorate my incredible athletic achievement." She hugged the penguin close, touched by the simple gesture. "I shall treasure it always," she replied with mock solemnity, before they both burst into laughter. As the afternoon sun began to soften, they found themselves drawn to the small stage where local musicians were performing. The current act, a young girl with a guitar, was singing a beautiful cover of "Bridge Over Troubled Water." Daniel wrapped his arm around Sarah's waist as they swayed to the music. She leaned into him, feeling completely at peace. Here, surrounded by her community, with Daniel by her side, everything felt right. "Thank you for sharing this with me," Daniel murmured in her ear. "I love seeing your world." "Thank you for wanting to be part of it," she replied. They found an empty bench near the park's edge, away from the main crowd but still within earshot of the music. Sarah clutched her stuffed penguin as Daniel told her about his childhood attempts at carnival games, including a particularly disastrous incident involving a water gun and his sister's new dress. As their laughter subsided, Sarah looked at Daniel in the golden evening light. His tie was slightly loosened, his hair ruffled by the autumn breeze, and his eyes crinkled with genuine joy. In that moment, she realized she had fallen for him completely. Not despite their differences, but because of who he was. Kind, unpretentious, and genuinely interested in her world. The festival continued around them, but in their quiet corner, Sarah and Daniel shared something deeper than the simple pleasure of a community fair. They had found their place together, bridging their two worlds into something new and beautiful. Sarah stared at her phone, her finger hovering over Mark's text message. The words blurred together as she read them for the 10th time. "I miss you. I know I messed up, but I've changed. Can we talk?" Her stomach churned. She set her phone face down on her desk at the library, trying to focus on cataloging the new arrivals. But her mind kept drifting back to the message, to memories of her relationship with Mark, both good and bad. The familiar scent of old books usually brought her comfort, but today it couldn't calm her racing thoughts. She picked up her phone again, reading Mark's message one more time. 5 years together wasn't something you could just erase, no matter how badly things had ended. Her computer pinged with a message from Daniel. "Hope you're having a good day. Looking forward to dinner tonight." Sarah's guilt intensified. Here was Daniel, kind and patient Daniel, who had never pressured her or made her feel small. Yet Mark's message had thrown her into such turmoil. Was she really ready for something serious with Daniel? Or was she just using him to get over Mark? "You look like you're solving world hunger over there," her coworker Jenny commented, passing by with a cart of returns. Sarah forced a smile. "Just thinking." "About tall, dark, and wealthy?" Jenny wiggled her eyebrows. "Actually—" Sarah hesitated. "Mark texted me." Jenny's expression darkened. "That jerk? What does he want?" "To talk. He says he's changed." "They all say that," Jenny scoffed. "Remember how he treated you? The constant criticism? The way he'd flirt with other women right in front of you?" Sarah nodded, but found herself defending him. "He wasn't all bad. We had good times too." "Honey, that's the trauma talking." Jenny parked her cart and leaned against Sarah's desk. "What about Daniel? He treats you like a queen." "Maybe that's the problem," Sarah mumbled. "Sometimes it feels too perfect, like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Mark. "Remember that little Italian place we used to go to? I'm there now. Join me for lunch? For old times' sake?" Sarah's hands trembled. The Italian place had been their spot, where they'd had their first date, where they'd celebrated anniversaries, where he'd first told her he loved her. She glanced at the clock. Her lunch break was coming up. Before she could talk herself out of it, she typed a reply. "Okay, give me 15 minutes." The walk to the restaurant felt like walking through molasses. Each step brought back memories, holding hands on sunny afternoons, sharing umbrellas on rainy days, their first kiss right around that corner. Mark was waiting outside, looking exactly as she remembered. His confident smile, the way he ran his hand through his salt and pepper hair, gestures that used to make her heart race. "Sarah," he said warmly, moving to hug her. She stepped back, keeping her distance. "Let's just talk," she said firmly. Over lunch, Mark was charming, attentive, everything she'd wished he'd been during their relationship. He spoke about therapy, about realizing his mistakes, about missing her every day. "I know what I lost," he said, reaching for her hand across the table. "Give me another chance to make it right." Sarah pulled her hand away, but the familiar flutter in her stomach betrayed her. Was this what she really wanted? The devil she knew versus the unknown with Daniel? That evening, as she prepared for dinner with Daniel, her thoughts were a tangled mess. When Daniel arrived at her door, his smile faltered slightly as he noticed her distraction. Throughout dinner, she was quiet, lost in thought. Daniel tried to engage her in conversation, but her responses were short, mechanical. Finally, Daniel set down his fork. "Sarah," he said gently, "what's wrong?" "Mark contacted me today," she admitted. "We had lunch." Daniel's face remained carefully neutral, but she saw the hurt flash in his eyes. "I see," he said softly. "And how do you feel about that?" "I don't know," she whispered, hating herself for the tears that threatened to fall. "I'm confused." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady despite the pain evident in his expression. "I care about you, Sarah. Deeply. But I want you to be sure about us. Maybe—" He paused, taking a deep breath. "Maybe you need some time to figure things out." "Daniel, He reached across the table, squeezing her hand gently. "It's okay. Take the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." The understanding in his voice only made Sarah feel worse. She watched as Daniel signaled for the check, knowing he was giving her space, but wishing she could be certain about what she wanted. Sarah sat in her favorite reading nook at home, surrounded by well-worn books that usually brought her comfort. Tonight, they offered little solace. Her conversation with Mark kept replaying in her mind, along with Daniel's hurt expression at dinner. She picked up an old photo album, flipping through pages of memories with Mark. There they were at parties, his arm around her waist, but his eyes often wandered to other women in the photos. Another picture showed them at Christmas. She remembered how he'd criticized her gift choices in front of his family, making her feel small and foolish. "What am I doing?" she whispered to herself, closing the album with trembling hands. Her grandmother's words from their last conversation echoed in her mind. "Sometimes we hold on to the past because it's familiar, not because it's good for us." Sarah reached for her journal, the one she'd started keeping after her breakup with Mark. She began reading entries from those dark days. "Mark said I embarrassed him at the company dinner again. Said I should learn to dress more professionally. I tried so hard to look nice. Another fight about my job. He doesn't understand why I want to stay at the library when he could support me. Says I'm wasting my potential. Found messages on his phone from Jessica again. He says they're just friends, but why does he hide their conversations?" Each entry felt like a fresh wound, but also like a wake-up call. She thought about her time with Daniel, how he listened intently when she talked about books, how he'd funded the library renovation not to show off his wealth, but because he understood her passion for literacy and community. Sarah remembered their first date, how Daniel had defended her against Mark without making a scene. He'd never once made her feel inferior about her job or her appearance. Instead, he celebrated her interests and encouraged her dreams. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Mark. "Think about what we talked about. We could be great together again." Sarah stared at the message, feeling something shift inside her. The flutter she'd felt at lunch wasn't attraction. It was anxiety. The same anxiety she'd lived with throughout their relationship, always walking on eggshells, never quite good enough. She thought about Daniel's words at dinner. "Take the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready." No pressure, no manipulation, just honest support. Rising from her chair, Sarah paced her small apartment. The contrast between the two men became starker with each step. Mark's charm now felt calculated, his promises hollow. She remembered how quickly his attentiveness would turn to criticism, how his affection always came with conditions. Daniel was different. He showed up consistently, respected her boundaries, and never tried to change her. Even now, when she'd hurt him by meeting Mark, he'd responded with understanding rather than anger or manipulation. Sarah stopped at her window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The confusion that had clouded her mind began to clear. Mark represented a past she'd outgrown, a relationship built on insecurity and control. Daniel offered something she'd never had before: acceptance, respect, and genuine care. Her hands shook slightly as she picked up her phone. Mark's message still waited for a response, but she found herself scrolling to Daniel's number instead. The time for running from happiness was over. She needed to be honest, with Daniel and with herself. Taking a deep breath, she typed, "Can we meet tomorrow? I'd like to talk." His response came quickly. "Of course. Name the time and place." Sarah smiled, feeling lighter than she had in days. She suggested their favorite coffee shop, neutral ground where they could have an open conversation. As she set her phone down, she knew what she needed to say to him. It wouldn't be easy to admit her fears and insecurities, but Daniel deserved her honesty. More than that, she deserved the chance to embrace something real, something good, even if it scared her. The morning sun cast long shadows through the cafe windows as Sarah fidgeted with her coffee cup. She'd arrived early, needing time to gather her thoughts. The familiar scent of coffee and fresh pastries usually brought her comfort, but today, her stomach was in knots. When Daniel walked in, her heart skipped. Even in casual clothes, a simple blue sweater and jeans, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Their eyes met, and his gentle smile made her nervous tension ease slightly. "Hi," she said softly as he sat down across from her. "Hi, Sarah." His voice was warm, lacking any hint of judgment or anger. Sarah took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I'm sorry for pushing you away," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "When Mark showed up, it brought back all these old insecurities, and I let them cloud my judgment." Daniel remained quiet, giving her space to continue. A barista passed by, the clinking of dishes providing a momentary distraction. "I've been thinking a lot about why I reacted the way I did," Sarah continued, meeting his eyes. "It wasn't really about Mark at all. It was about me being scared." She paused, gathering courage. "Scared of how much I care about you. Scared of letting myself be vulnerable with someone so different from what I'm used to." A gentle understanding filled Daniel's expression. He reached across the table, his hand resting near hers, close enough to offer support, but not demanding contact. "The truth is," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger, "I've spent so long protecting myself, building walls, convincing myself that I didn't deserve something real. When you came along, when you showed me such kindness and acceptance, it terrified me." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. "You're successful, confident, and could have anyone you want. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to realize that I'm just ordinary." Daniel leaned forward slightly, his eyes intent on hers. "May I speak now?" Sarah nodded, managing a small smile despite her nervousness. "I understand fear, Sarah. Every day, I meet people who see my wealth before they see me. They have expectations, assumptions about who I am and what I want." He paused, considering his words carefully. "But you saw past all that. You challenged me intellectually, made me laugh, showed me what genuine connection feels like." A couple at the next table got up to leave, their chairs scraping against the floor. Sarah barely noticed, focused entirely on Daniel's words. "When I'm with you," he continued, "I don't feel like a CEO or a billionaire. I feel like myself. Just Daniel. Do you know how rare that is?" Sarah felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back, touched by his honesty. "I know our worlds seem different," Daniel said softly, "but that's what makes this special. You bring something real and grounding to my life. I don't want you to change or try to fit into some mold of what you think I want. I want you exactly as you are." Sarah reached out, finally letting her fingers touch his. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "But not of you, of losing this connection we have, of not being enough." "Then let's take it one day at a time," Daniel suggested, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "No pressure, no expectations. Just us getting to know each other, building trust, seeing where this leads naturally." The morning light had shifted, casting a warm glow across their table. Sarah felt something settle in her chest, not the complete absence of fear, but a new kind of peace alongside it. "I'd like that," she said, squeezing his hand. "One day at a time." Daniel smiled, and for the first time in days, Sarah felt truly present in the moment, not caught between past and future anxieties. They sat there, hands linked across the table, letting the quiet understanding build between them. Sarah sat on Daniel's plush living room couch, tucked comfortably in a corner with a steaming mug of tea. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the simple yet elegant space. Despite the grandeur of his penthouse, Daniel had managed to make it feel warm and inviting. "I never thought I'd feel this comfortable here," Sarah admitted, watching Daniel settle into the armchair across from her. He'd traded his usual business attire for jeans and a soft gray sweater, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "What did you expect?" Daniel asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Sarah laughed softly. "I don't know. Marble statues? Gold-plated everything? A butler following us around?" "Sorry to disappoint," Daniel grinned. "The butler has weekends off." Their shared laughter filled the room, and Sarah felt the last traces of tension melt away. They'd spent the morning making breakfast together, Daniel proving surprisingly skilled at making French toast, and now had the whole weekend stretching ahead of them. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah set her mug down on the coffee table. "What scared you most growing up?" Daniel's expression turned thoughtful. "Loneliness, I think. My parents were always busy with work and other kids. Well, they either wanted to be my friend because of my family's money or resented me for it. I learned early on that wealth can be incredibly isolating." Sarah nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "That's why you're so normal about it all. You don't flaunt it." "Exactly." Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "What about you? What were your fears?" "Not being enough," Sarah answered without hesitation. "Not smart enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough. I buried myself in books because they never judged me. They just offered endless possibilities." Daniel's eyes softened. "Is that why you became a librarian?" "Partly." Sarah pulled her legs up under her, getting more comfortable. "I wanted to help others find that same escape, that same sense of possibility. There's something magical about connecting someone with exactly the right book at the right moment." "You light up when you talk about it," Daniel observed. "Your whole face changes." Sarah felt a blush creep across her cheeks. "What about you? Do you really love what you do? Or is it just what was expected of you?" "Both, actually." Daniel stood up and moved to sit beside her on the couch, maintaining a respectful distance. "I love the challenge of creating something new, of solving problems. But yes, there was pressure to join the family business. I just got lucky that it aligned with my interests." They spent hours like this, trading stories and questions. Sarah learned about Daniel's dream of using his technology to improve education access in underprivileged areas. Daniel discovered Sarah's secret desire to write children's books someday. They talked about their families, their embarrassing moments, their proudest achievements. As afternoon faded into evening, Sarah realized something profound. They balanced each other perfectly. Her caution tempered his boldness. His confidence helped her believe in herself. Where she offered groundedness and authenticity, He provided perspective and possibility. "You know what I've realized?" Daniel said, now sitting closer to her, their shoulders nearly touching. "You make me feel like I can just be myself. No pretense, no expectations." Sarah turned to face him, struck by the vulnerability in his expression. "And you make me feel like myself too, but a braver version. Like maybe all those possibilities I've read about in books aren't so out of reach after all." "They're not," Daniel said softly. He took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "Sarah, I want you to know something. When I think about the future, my future, I want you in it. I don't know exactly where this will lead us, but I know I want to find out. Together." Sarah's heart raced at his words, hope and excitement bubbling up inside her. She looked at their intertwined hands, then back at his earnest face, seeing all her own hopes and fears reflected in his eyes. Sarah stood backstage at the newly renovated library's main hall, her hands trembling as she smoothed down her navy blue dress. This time she'd chosen her outfit carefully. Professional, yet comfortable. A far cry from the shabby dress she'd worn on that first date with Daniel. The murmur of the gathering crowd beyond the curtain made her stomach flutter with butterflies. "5 minutes, Ms. Donovan," one of the event coordinators whispered, clipboard in hand. Sarah nodded, taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. The space around her was transformed. Gleaming wooden shelves stretched toward high ceilings, modern reading nooks dotted the corners, and state-of-the-art computers lined the walls. It was everything she'd dreamed of for the library and more. She peeked through a gap in the curtain. The hall was packed with familiar faces, regular library patrons, community leaders, and local families. Her grandmother sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Sarah's eyes drifted to the back of the room, where Daniel stood quietly, trying to blend in despite his height and natural presence. He caught her eye and gave her a subtle thumbs up. "Ladies and gentlemen," the library board president began from the podium, "please welcome our beloved head librarian, Sarah Donovan, to share her thoughts on this remarkable transformation." The applause startled Sarah into motion. She walked onto the stage, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The lights felt warm on her face as she approached the podium, her prepared notes clutched in her hands. "Good evening," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. 20 years ago, I walked into this library for the first time as a young woman seeking refuge in books. Today, I stand before you in a space that represents not just physical renovation, but the renewal of our community's commitment to learning and growth. As she spoke, Sarah felt her nervousness melting away. She shared stories of children discovering their first favorite books, elderly patrons finding connection through reading groups, and students achieving their dreams through the library's resources. "This renovation means more than just new furniture and technology," she continued, her passion evident in her voice. "It represents possibility. Every child who walks through these doors will know that their community believes in their potential. Every adult will find resources to pursue their dreams, no matter their age or background." Sarah glanced at her notes, but found she didn't need them anymore. The words flowed naturally, powered by years of dedication and love for her work. She spoke about the anonymous donation that made it all possible, carefully avoiding looking at Daniel. "Some might see a library as just a building full of books," she said, her voice growing stronger. "But I've always known it's more than that. It's a sanctuary where curiosity is celebrated, where stories connect us, and where everyone, regardless of who they are or where they come from, has equal access to knowledge and opportunity." The crowd listened intently, nodding and smiling. Sarah saw tears in her grandmother's eyes, and even the usually stoic board members looked moved. As we cut the ribbon today and officially reopen our doors, Sarah concluded, I want to thank everyone who believed in this vision. To our anonymous benefactor, whose generosity made this possible, and to every member of this community who supports our mission. Thank you for believing in the power of books to change lives. The applause was immediate and heartfelt. People rose to their feet, their appreciation genuine and warm. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the response, her cheeks flushing with emotion. From the back of the room, Daniel applauded with the rest, his face glowing with pride and admiration. As Sarah stood at the podium, taking in the moment, she realized how far she'd come from the insecure woman who'd walked into that first blind date. The library's transformation mirrored her own. Both had been renewed and strengthened, ready for whatever the future might bring. The board president returned to the podium with a large pair of ceremonial scissors, ready for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Sarah stepped back, her heart full, as the community celebrated not just the library's renewal, but the spirit of possibility it represented. The last of the crowd filtered out through the library's grand entrance, leaving behind the lingering warmth of celebration and new beginnings. Sarah stood in the center of the main reading room, her hand trailing along the smooth surface of a newly installed oak table. The setting sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. She closed her eyes, taking in the familiar scent of books mixed with the newness of fresh paint and varnished wood. The evening had been more than just a celebration of the library's renovation. It had been a testament to growth, to accepting change, to embracing possibility. You were amazing up there. Daniel's voice came from behind her, soft and genuine. Sarah turned to face him, a smile playing at her lips. I was terrified, she admitted, but once I started talking about the library, everything else just fell away. That's because you were speaking from your heart. Daniel moved closer, his presence steady and reassuring. It's one of the things I love most about you. Your passion for what matters. She felt her cheeks warm at his words, but the old instinct to deflect the compliment didn't surface. Instead, she let herself accept it, appreciate it. 6 months ago, I would have run from this conversation. Daniel chuckled. 6 months ago, you did run from this conversation. I did, didn't I? Sarah shook her head, remembering her initial panic when she'd discovered his true identity. I was so convinced that someone like you couldn't possibly be interested in someone like me. And now? Daniel asked, his eyes searching hers. Sarah moved to one of the new reading nooks, settling into the comfortable window seat. The evening light cast a golden glow across her face. Now I understand that I was looking at everything wrong. I was so focused on our differences, your wealth, my modest life, the age gap, that I couldn't see what actually mattered. Daniel sat beside her, leaving just enough space to be comfortable. Which is, that love isn't about matching perfectly on paper, Sarah said, her voice soft but certain. It's about how you make me feel seen, how you listen when I talk about books for hours, how you defended me against Mark without making me feel weak. It's about all the small moments that add up to something real. She glanced around the renovated library, taking in all the improvements that would help so many people. When I found out you funded this, I was angry because I thought you were trying to buy my affection. But I understand now. You saw something that mattered to me and supported it, not to impress me, but because you cared. I've never met anyone quite like you, Sarah, Daniel said, his voice tender. Someone who values sincerity over status, who sees past the surface to what's real underneath. You make me feel like I can just be myself. Sarah felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or insecurity. They were tears of recognition, of finally seeing herself through the eyes of someone who truly cared. I spent so long thinking I needed to be perfect to be loved, she confessed. That I needed to be younger, or more sophisticated, or somehow different than who I am. But love isn't about being perfect, is it? It's about being real. Daniel reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. The gesture was simple but profound, a physical manifestation of their connection, their trust, their growing love. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the library in shades of gold and amber. Sarah felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. Here, in this moment, she didn't need to question or doubt. She didn't need to be anything other than herself. The library had always been her sanctuary, a place where she felt most authentically herself. Now, sitting here with Daniel, their hands joined, she realized that love could be a sanctuary too, a space where imperfection was welcome, where authenticity was celebrated, where being real was more valuable than being right. The morning sun streamed through the library windows as Sarah organized books on the newly installed shelves. The renovation had transformed the space into something magical, yet it still held the comfortable warmth she'd always loved. She hummed softly, running her fingers along the spines of classic novels, appreciating how the old and new blended seamlessly together. "I thought I might find you here," Daniel's voice echoed through the quiet space. Sarah turned, a smile spreading across her face. He stood there in a casual blue sweater and jeans, looking slightly nervous, something she rarely saw in him. "I'm just making sure everything's in its proper place before we officially reopen tomorrow." "Always taking care of others," he said, walking toward her. "It's one of the countless things I love about you." Something in his tone made her heart skip. She set down the book she was holding, giving him her full attention. "You seem different this morning. Is everything okay?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his rare moments of uncertainty. "More than okay. Sarah, do you remember the first time we met?" "How could I forget?" She laughed softly. "I was wearing that horrible dress." "You were beautiful," he interrupted, taking her hands in his. "Not because of what you were wearing, but because you were completely, authentically yourself. No pretense, no agenda. Just you. Brilliant, caring, genuine you." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. Even after all this time, his earnest compliments still made her blush. "Daniel, please let me finish," he said gently, squeezing her hands. "That night, I realized how tired I was of people wearing masks around me, of never knowing if someone liked me for who I am or what I have. But with you, I never had to wonder. You challenged me. You were honest with me. You even pushed me away when you thought I was trying to buy your affection." He chuckled at the memory, and Sarah felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. Daniel reached up to brush away a tear that had escaped. "Every day since then, you've shown me what real love looks like. It's in the way you light up when talking about your favorite books, how you remember every regular visitor's name at the library, how you never let me get away with taking myself too seriously." Daniel took a deep breath, and to Sarah's surprise, lowered himself to one knee. Her heart began to race as he pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. "Sarah Donovan, you've taught me that true worth isn't measured in bank accounts or business deals, but in the way we treat others, in the passion we bring to what we love, in the courage to be vulnerable with someone we trust." Sarah's hands trembled as Daniel opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring with a single diamond surrounded by small sapphires, her favorite stone. "I don't want a life filled with superficial connections and empty success. I want a life with you, reading together on quiet evenings, debating about books, supporting each other's dreams, and facing whatever challenges come our way as partners. I want to wake up every morning knowing that I get to love someone as remarkable as you." Tears were flowing freely down Sarah's cheeks now, but she couldn't look away from Daniel's earnest expression. "I promise to always support your dreams, to never make you feel less than the amazing woman you are, and to love you exactly as you are, not despite your imperfections, but because of them. Sarah, will you marry me?" Sarah's heart felt so full it might burst. The fears and doubts that had plagued her when they first met seemed distant now, replaced by a deep certainty that this was right. This was real. This was love in its truest form. Through happy tears, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Daniel, yes." Sarah sat cross-legged on her apartment floor, surrounded by moving boxes and memories. Daniel lounged beside her, helping sort through years of collected books and trinkets. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over them both. "I can't believe how many books you've accumulated," Daniel chuckled, picking up a well-worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. "Though I probably shouldn't be surprised." Sarah smiled, running her fingers along the book's spine. "Each one has a story beyond the pages. This one got me through my first heartbreak in college." Daniel set the book carefully in a box marked Priority Study. They'd agreed that the first room they'd set up in their shared home would be a library, a perfect blend of their passions. "Speaking of stories," Daniel said, shifting to face her, "I've been thinking about our honeymoon. What would you say to a literary tour of Europe?" Sarah's eyes widened. "You mean Shakespeare's Globe in London, Victor Hugo's house in Paris, the Trinity College Library in Dublin?" He grinned at her growing excitement. "We could trace the footsteps of your favorite authors." "That sounds incredible," she breathed, then hesitated. "But wouldn't you rather do something more exciting? You're used to yacht parties and private islands." Daniel reached over and took her hand. "Sarah, what's exciting to me is seeing your face light up when you talk about books. Besides," he added with a playful wink, "I've done the yacht thing. Trust me, reading Shakespeare where Shakespeare lived, that's much more interesting." They continued sorting through Sarah's belongings, their conversation flowing naturally from travel plans to their future home life. Sarah pulled out a photo album, and they paused to look through it together. "Is this your family's cabin?" Daniel asked, pointing to a picture of a rustic house by a lake. "Yes, we used to spend every summer there when I was little." Sarah's voice grew wistful. "It's where I learned to love reading. I'd sit on the dock for hours with a book." "We should go there," Daniel suggested. "Maybe make it our own tradition? A quiet place to escape when city life gets too hectic?" Sarah leaned against him, touched by how he always found ways to weave her past into their future. "I'd love that, though I should warn you, no Wi-Fi." "Even better," he laughed. "Just us, books, and nature." They moved on to discussing more practical matters: which furniture to keep, how to merge their different styles, where to donate the duplicates. But even these mundane conversations felt special, each decision another thread weaving their lives together. "What about holiday traditions?" Sarah asked, carefully wrapping a ceramic mug her grandmother had given her. "Your family must have their own way of celebrating." "They do," Daniel admitted, "but I think we should create our own traditions. Maybe combine the best of both our families and add something uniquely ours?" Sarah nodded, imagining Christmas mornings spent reading together by a fire, or Thanksgiving dinners where everyone shared stories instead of just watching football. "I'd like that." As they worked, they discussed their daily routines, how they'd balance their different schedules, and their hopes for the future. Daniel talked about teaching Sarah to cook. She was notorious for burning even toast, while Sarah promised to introduce him to the joy of reading poetry aloud. Finally, Sarah picked up the last book from the floor, a blank journal. Daniel smiled when he saw it. "Perfect timing," he said. "A new book for our new chapter." Sarah ran her hand over the empty pages. "Our story," she said softly. "The best one yet," Daniel agreed, helping her to her feet. "Ready to go home?" Sarah looked around her half-empty apartment, then back at Daniel. Home wasn't about the place anymore. It was about the person she'd be sharing it with. "I'm ready." They carried the last boxes down to the waiting car, their conversation already turning to plans for dinner and where to put Sarah's reading chair in their bedroom. As they drove toward their shared future, Sarah felt a deep sense of rightness settle over her. This was exactly where she was meant to be. Sarah adjusted her glasses as she sorted through a pile of children's books, creating neat stacks based on reading levels. The library's new summer reading program was her latest joint project with Daniel, and the enthusiasm from local families had exceeded their expectations. "I think we'll need more prizes for the reading challenge," Daniel said, looking up from his laptop where he tracked the program's statistics. "Participation is almost double what we projected." Sarah beamed with pride. "It's amazing how many kids signed up, though I suspect having a tech billionaire offering coding workshops as rewards might have something to do with it." "Hey now," Daniel chuckled, closing his laptop. "Your storytelling sessions are just as popular. Did you see how packed it was yesterday during Dragons and Dinosaurs Hour?" They had transformed the library's children's section into an interactive learning space, combining Sarah's literary expertise with Daniel's technological innovation. Touchscreen displays showcased book recommendations while maintaining the warm, traditional atmosphere Sarah loved. "Remember when you first suggested this partnership?" Sarah asked, thinking back to their early days. "I was so worried about mixing business with our personal life." Daniel moved to help her with the books. "And now look at us, the dynamic duo of digital literacy." Their collaborative efforts had extended beyond the library. They'd established a scholarship fund for underprivileged students, created a mentorship program connecting tech professionals with local schools, and even launched a mobile library service for rural communities. "The bookmobile was definitely your best idea," Daniel said, as if reading her thoughts. "Though I still think we should have named it the Bookmobile." Sarah groaned at his terrible pun. "That's almost as bad as when you suggested pros and cons for the prison reading program." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, their movements synchronized after months of working side by side. Sarah noticed how Daniel automatically knew which books she'd want to feature in the front displays, just as she had learned to anticipate when he needed her input on making technical features more user-friendly. Later that afternoon, they visited the community center where they'd sponsored an after-school program. Children rushed to greet them, excited to share their progress in both reading and basic coding. Sarah watched as Daniel patiently helped a young girl debug her first computer program, his genuine interest in her success evident in every interaction. "Ms. Sarah!" A small boy tugged at her sleeve. "I finished the whole Harry Potter series, just like you said I could." Sarah knelt down to his level, sharing his excitement. "That's wonderful, Tommy. Would you like to tell me about your favorite part?" As she listened to Tommy's animated description of Quidditch matches, she caught Daniel watching her with a soft smile. These moments, where their individual passions merged to create something meaningful, had become the foundation of their relationship. After the community center, they stopped by the local senior center, where they'd implemented a digital literacy program alongside a book club. The sight of elderly residents confidently using tablets to connect with distant family members while discussing classic literature never failed to warm Sarah's heart. "Mrs. Henderson asked about our wedding plans again," Daniel mentioned as they left. "She's determined to teach me how to waltz properly before the big day." Sarah laughed, remembering the impromptu dance lesson the elderly woman had given them last week. "She says your posture needs work." The sun was setting as they drove home, casting long shadows across their tree-lined street. Their new house, a perfect blend of modern technology and classic charm, came into view. Daniel had insisted on keeping many of Sarah's furniture pieces, claiming they gave the place character. Her old reading chair now sat proudly in their shared study, next to his state-of-the-art desktop setup. They settled onto the porch swing, another of Sarah's treasured possessions, with cups of tea. The evening air was cool and fragrant with blooming jasmine. Sarah leaned against Daniel's shoulder, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the sky in soft pinks and purples. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked quietly. "That night when I showed up to our blind date in that horrible dress?" Sarah and Daniel stepped into the library's main hall, their footsteps echoing softly against the polished floors. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting warm patterns across the new reading areas where comfortable chairs invited readers to lose themselves in stories. "I still can't believe how different it looks," Sarah whispered, squeezing Daniel's hand. The renovation had transformed the space while keeping its soul intact. Modern technology blended seamlessly with classic architectural elements, creating an atmosphere that was both innovative and welcoming. Daniel smiled, watching a group of children gathered around one of the interactive story stations they'd installed. "Remember when you were worried the tablets would make it feel too corporate?" "And you proved me wrong," Sarah admitted, leading him toward the reference section. "The way you integrated everything so naturally, it's perfect." They passed Mrs. Chen, one of their regular patrons, who waved from her usual spot by the window. She had been one of the first to embrace the new digital catalog system, despite her initial hesitation with technology. Now she helped other seniors navigate the library's resources with confidence. "The community workshops are really making a difference," Daniel observed, nodding toward the glass-walled study rooms where a coding class was in session. "I never expected such enthusiasm for the tech literacy programs." Sarah stopped at the children's section, her heart warming at the sight of the reading nook they'd designed together. Soft cushions in various shapes created cozy spots for young readers, while interactive wall panels displayed animated book recommendations. "This is still my favorite spot," she said, running her hand along one of the wooden shelves. "The way we managed to keep the wonder of traditional books while making everything more accessible." Daniel wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "It's all because of you, you know. Your vision for what this place could be, how it could serve everyone in the community. I just provided the tools." They continued their walk through the library, pausing to chat with volunteers and patrons. The Teenage Gaming Club was setting up for their weekly meeting in one corner, while a retired English teacher led a poetry discussion in another. The space hummed with activity and purpose. "Oh, look!" Sarah pointed to a wall display showcasing local authors. "They've added new works to the community collection." Daniel grinned, remembering how passionate Sarah had been about supporting local writers. The program they'd started, offering writing workshops and publishing resources, had already helped several aspiring authors share their stories with the world. They made their way to the rooftop garden, another addition that had quickly become a favorite spot for readers seeking fresh air and inspiration. Potted plants and comfortable seating created an oasis above the city streets. "I never thought I'd find someone who understood both parts of me," Sarah said softly, looking out over the city. "The quiet bookworm who loves old stories, and the part that wants to help people grow and learn." Daniel turned to face her, his eyes full of warmth. "And I never thought I'd find someone who could see past the wealth and status to who I really am. Someone who challenges me to use what I have to make a real difference." The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, casting a gentle glow over them. Below, they could see people coming and going from the library, each carrying books or tablets, each part of the community they'd helped nurture. Sarah leaned into Daniel's embrace, feeling completely at peace. "We make a good team, don't we?" "The best," he agreed, pulling her closer. They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the garden they'd planted together, watching their shared vision flourish around them. Then Daniel tilted Sarah's face up to his, and their lips met in a soft, loving kiss that held all the promise of their future together. Breaking apart, they smiled at each other, knowing that their love story was just beginning. Hand in hand, they walked toward the rooftop door, ready to face whatever adventures awaited them.